Yeah, none of the other stuff was announced. Well, the ArcSys wouldn't do that because there's going to be way more people tuning in and watching the Arc System Works finals, Arc Revo, than this. The idea is to get the most eyes and ears on things. And Netflix made their official announcement. Oh my god. He sounds like... Okay, there we go. Sounded like he was speaking from 6 floors above heaven.
Yeah, so he's saying this is the 3rd time. So this time, Bandai Namco didn't produce it. Sega's in charge this time. So he's kind
How weird.
The first time on the panel, too.
How weird. Sega is actually the one that's running this one? How weird.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
The fighting game collection, right?
Yeah, so he's in charge of not only Street Fighter V Battle Director, but also Street Fighter 6 and also the Battle Collection.
Oh, wow.
They announced previously.
He's the battle director. He's one of the battle directors on Street Fighter 6, and he's making the Capcom Fighting Collection. Ooh, interesting.
But here we go. The first theme of the round table here. Wow. This is a
That's a good topic.
Free-to-play in fighting games. So they're going to hear the insight from the different devs here.
There's a good reason why Sega's talking about this, because Virtua Fighter was hugely fucking successful.
So he's talking about Tekken Revolution, I believe. Actually trying to monetize off of it. It was one of the first actual console titles that we tried to do free-to-play with.
Yeah, and trying to monetize, right? Because that's the whole idea, right? He said that was the experience. Like, how do we monetize? How do we make money on a free-to-play game?
And then DLC, right? So the main portion of the game is free, but they'll hope that they'll buy the various customization costumes, whatever.
Virtua Fighter didn't do it specifically bad.
Ooh. So it's kind of the same thing that Harada said, where it's not a true free-to-play. It's not 100%, but it's kind of the base game is free, then the DLC they charge for. But he said a very interesting thing that he thinks maybe this is the future, right?
That's a smart guy. Very good to hear that coming from the Virtua Fighter devs, considering Virtua Fighter would be a perfect free-to-play fighting game.
So again, they're asking, what do you think about, what's your opinion of a free-to-play game for a fighting game? Because, you know, free-to-play fighting would be different from a mobile game.
Zaraj is saying when he looks at the comments, many people say Revolution was a mistake or a failure.
He mentioned
it was an attempt, what it was.
It was a test, so.
But he's just saying, you know, what is the failure? It really depends on what you're trying to achieve with the project itself.
It obviously wasn't as popular as, like, you know, the main name titles, but they got some data about it, and who knows what's going to happen in the future here.
Talking about, like, you know, how does the project actually start off? Are you trying to actually monetize in depth, or is it just like a free period of play?
Yeah, that was, you know, like Revolution is free the whole time. Virtua Fighter is 2 months. Street Fighter, I'm sure Matsumoto will mention that too, but they've done free to play as well on PS Plus in the past year.
So Harada's conclusion was, as a business, you know, we figured that we were much better off just actually selling the game.
Charging money, right?
Yeah. As you know, Tekken 7, it's done quite well. Not just, you know, selling a game and then it's it. He's talking about actually selling it and continuing to update it with content.
That is the old way. And it's either going to work or it's going to run into a Soul Calibur problem and it's not going to work.
2 years after a fighting game was released, usually saw a huge decline in the player base.
It was over, yeah. But now with the new model of putting out new seasons and new DLC, you can have one title that lasts for a very long time. Continues not only for the game to survive, but also for the company to keep earning money, too. So if you make a game free to play, you're going to have a huge player base at the start.
He's making a good point that if you release something for completely free, obviously you're going to get a large initial player base, and maybe it's a good marketing objective to try to get people in the future. But it's more, rather than actually being able to take that user base with you, it's kind of a PR mechanic, mostly.
So he's mentioning right here, it's almost like a PR stunt, right? So if you make something free to play, you're gonna get, like you mentioned, a huge player base. It's gonna create a buzz right there. But then, what do you do from that?
Yep.
I don't understand how that's any different than the game costing $60.
I think
I mean, historically, fighting games come out in Japan, and they're only popular for 1 week, and then they go away.
Play portion of their game, right?
Yeah.
Games go on sale insanely fast in Japan.
They're not here this time, unfortunately. They mentioned last time that the DLC was hundreds, thousands of dollars if you wanted to get everything. So yeah, so talking about free to play. So of course we mentioned this before. Project L. Yeah. So Harada expects that Hamiko as well predicts that Project L will be free to play. So this kind of game is going to be popular around the world. So how are they going to monetize it? Harada's very interested in. He's looking forward to how they actually turn that into a business model.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not just one of the typical patterns we've seen up until now. They'll probably take a more
Skins.
complete approach.
Skins, colors,
And very
customizations
too. If Project L is free
Stages.
to play and it is a success, that could completely shape.
Change the color of your special moves. There's a billion different things you can change in a fighting game. The problem is, chat, is that there's not a ton of there's not an absolute ton of crazy successful free-to-play games in Japan.
His role is
outside
different.
of like Sega, right?
What are you going to? Like as a developer, as like a game developer, he doesn't want to think about that, right?
This makes sense that Sega's bringing up this conversation
the development process.
because Sega's the one that's had success with it. Apex is huge in Japan, right? But Apex is not a Japanese game. I'm talking about a game made in Japan with free-to-play success in Japan. What I'm getting out of this is that Sega, because this is like their topic, Sega wants to make VF free to play, which is smart. If they make a new Virtua Fighter, make it amazing looking, and make it cross-play, and actually free to play, that would be smart. Because what's Virtua Fighter all about? Customization anyway.
Because subscription is over a period of time where
The subscription thing is insane. No, absolutely not. I don't know what industry we're in to think that we can charge like an MMO subscription for things. The reason Sega wants to talk about it is that they just saw a whole bunch of success from doing this with Virtua Fighter.
The company kind of asks of him that he
So
thinks about how to
Sega's like, well, the numbers are there. So what do we? It's a good topic of conversation. Now, like now they've seen the light. They're like, oh shit, this could work. And they have all these other games that they've done now that are free to play and have made them an absolute shit ton of money for almost a decade.
The arcades, he's saying,
So
we used to just be in charge of.
Yeah, so he's talking about everybody's watching. There's a lot of gamers here, not just fighting game players. So you guys understand about shooting games here. FPS games.
You don't.
He's talking about shooting games. It's mainly aiming and shooting your opponent, right? So it's easier for the community to travel from one game to another. Because
basically, the base of all FPS games is aim and shoot, right? The fighting games are a bit different because, you know, Guilty Gear and Tekken, they're both fighting games, but they're completely different, right? 2D air dashing game and then a 3D ground-based game.
That is a fucking okay. So that is a hilarious take to say that like Warzone's the same as Apex is the same as Fortnite. That's a hilarious take. That is a very like I've never actually played these things take. Is what that is. That's oh man.
Everyone will at least pick up the
chat. There is such a thing as the Japanese bubble when it comes to business. They are very much in their own sphere, and looking outside that sphere to what's happening around the industry, what's happening around the relative collective spectrum of the worldwide industry is very, very different than the way Japanese business works. And this isn't just the video game side; it's all of entertainment. All Japanese and most Japanese regular businesses are like this. Boiling ever so slightly. There's just a little bit of boiling, a slight bit of fuming here. Although somewhat excited, right? Sega has seen the golden the golden valley that is free to play fighting games, and they've had a taste of it, and they made money. And it was a relatively low budget project, all things considered, to remake VF, give it a new style, and make it free for a few months.
The old SNK games.
They're like shit. Shit.
He's talking about
maybe this is the way to go. And all it will take is a Japanese dev to do it, to be ridiculously successful, for all the other devs to catch on. But a Japanese developer will have to do it. You know, it's already happened in the West technically, and it's going to happen to a really big budget fighting game soon. which is technically League. Like I said, we had this conversation literally last night. Free-to-play fighting games, the scope of how fighting games are released and distributed will be completely different in 3 to 4 years. By 2025, we'll be playing fighting games a completely different way than we're playing them right now.
That makes sense. When you're developing your own fighting game, what do users expect?
The base, right? Street Fighter 5 is the base.
Makes a lot of sense for considering Strive, right? What he's saying literally about Street Fighter being like the base, being literally the base of like what people expect out of a 2D fighting game.
Katano-san is looking at when he's trying to figure out where to go.
Pretty much admitting that like Guilty Gear Strive was heavily influenced from Street Fighter 5.
He's talking about when you don't want to like aggravate your user base or whatever, you can kind of look at Street Fighter and see what the expectations are before you try to do your own thing.
Just kind of again, very, very praise. But Rada's like,
we could tell, you know, we could tell from the very first time.
That was really like
tell from the very first time we played the game. There seemed to be a lot of influence there. Funny note about a lot of
they do a great job of communication.
devs in Japan chat is that a lot of fighting game developers are drinking buddies. And that's the way a lot of weirdly Japanese like higher end relationships of people that are responsible for franchises, they usually meet together at bars and just shoot the shit, and a lot of like business relationships will start that way.
So a lot of new characters came into KOF at 14, and they're not really in 15, right? So he's feeling, where are these new characters in 15? And talking about
cut him off.
The announcements and everything.
Cut him off.
Yeah.
Cut his mic.
If you weren't familiar with
cut his mic.
They put a new trailer out once a week.
We don't need those KOF 14 characters back. No. Cut the mic. Yeah. Talking about Sylvia and stuff, we can cut the mic.
So he's saying when Guilty Gear Strive, they put out their new characters, they also did these character trailers, but they were really, really difficult, and they said, we never want to do them again. So SNK was able to do it once a week for like months, so he's like, that must have been crazy. How was it?
Tekken 2, man, it's always a nightmare.
Yeah.
Ah.
Are those trailers really that hard to do?
Yeah.
And then had to go through all the characters, right?
At the start, they planned
As
to do it
somebody
one trailer per
with
week
just a
up until
little bit
release.
of experience in that regard, I'm really curious, what about that is so crazy difficult?
Release got delayed, so you had to like lengthen out the promo plan, right?
So it's like, we had this big plan. It was very weekly, but then since it got delayed and everything, they ran out of ideas too. It's like, damn, what do we do now? What do we do now?
Every KI trailer I made took less than a week.
Maybe went down a little bit, but it's still a big success, I think.
And it was like me and a couple of editors that were working at Microsoft.
They had the Heroines games.
They were on like a production team. They did graphics. I think the biggest so far, as we are in the middle of this roundtable, there is some interesting topics in here. Though the most fascinating one is the free-to-play discussion that happened right at the beginning, right? And the fact that this is you literally get the direct interpretation from the other devs that have historically been releasing premium-priced fighting games, you know, throughout their entire existence, where they come out at full price, regardless of like the content, even though the content might not be relative to other games' content that is full price, you know? Because most of Japanese fighting game development is still stuck in arcade days, right? Japanese fighting games are, by in turn, arcade games for the most part. Nothing has ever really eclipsed the crazy, the crazy boundary that like Mortal Kombat has or NRS has done with their games. Some have tried, but the efforts are essentially like not as fruitful. And Capcom and Tekken have sort of done the same thing. Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom, and Tekken have tried to also do the story mode thing to a wide variety of either successes or detriments. But it didn't really have the other content, right? For everybody that might have been happy with the story mode in Tekken, the arcade story for that game, the arcade mode endings were super weird. It was like one fight or something like that. It's been so long since I've done them. But it was a long time ago. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get at is that Japanese fighting games, for the most part, are still arcade games at their core. There's either two different takes. You either make your fighting game as content-rich as something like, you know, what a single-player game that has multiplayer would be offering. or you approach it the NRS way, where they just have a ton of stuff, right? Just an absolute metric shit ton of things that they put into their game that allow the player to enjoy outside of just beating ass or getting ass beaten online. And the other one, which was the first topic, make the game free to play. What is the state of free to play games? And most of the Japanese mentality, the business mentality, is that fighting games are premium paced games, even though they haven't really felt like they might be worthy of the premium price point. But it works because people keep buying the characters, people keep buying the DLC packs. Like, over time, the game is supported, and they add stuff and things that people will spend money on. They're still that way. So the big difference, the big takeaway from this conversation is that a big Japanese game, like a large-scale Japanese fighting game, has not fully committed to the free-to-play model. Even if you talk about DOA, DOA 5 had to essentially be under a huge detriment of no success when it first came out to adopt the free-to-play model, and the same thing happened for DOA 6, where it didn't start off as free-to-play. It started off as a premium-priced game. So, what's it going to take for a fighting game to actually get for a fighting game to actually get a big AAA-looking, beautiful game, crazy, awesome-looking game that is truly free-to-play, where the online functionality of the game, as well as all the characters involved, follow a model that allow people just to enjoy that with each other completely for free. And Project L is the next big game that might do it, because it's already been done by Brawlhalla and several other fighting games to a variety of successes. But none of them have been giant fighting games, right? None of them have been huge. Project L is not a Japanese game, though. But it's one that a lot of Japanese developers are paying attention to, because guess why they're paying attention to it? Riot has a lot of money. Riot is a very successful company and has found ways to make a shit ton of money off of their franchises and games. So, at that point, they're looking at, what are we doing wrong? What it's really going to take is a Japanese dev to execute a truly free-to-play fighting game where you can sell things like costumes and accessories and skins and a whole bunch of other stuff that'll eventually be added and updated, like once a month or something like that, once every month and a month or two, and will be supported. Because Sega has seen a little bit of that fruit from the tree. They took a bite of that apple, and they took a big risk by spending at least a bit of money remaking Virtua Fighter in a completely different engine, and then making all of that technically free on PlayStation for a couple months. So the point is, that proved to be very successful. That actually got the attention of executives, and apparently might be having a huge impact on where they are going with Virtua Fighter as a series from this point forward. In fact, the first actual good-looking, high-production, free-to-play fighting game that we see is actually the fighting game that it should be. Even though it'd be great for Street Fighter, it'd be great for Tekken, it'd be great for all these games, it should be Virtua Fighter, and it looks like it might actually be VF.
He says, sorry, Capcom Bros. He doesn't really have any slides because he already announced everything. Yeah, so last month they announced that they're developing Street Fighter 6. This summer they're going to have more details. So right now they're really working hard, not only to develop the game, but also to prepare some stuff that they can show you.
Yeah,
so
getting
ready. They're gonna, I guess this summer, right? They're
getting Slice of Life ready to show everybody is difficult.
You're saying from the visuals you saw, they have a lot of new challenges this time around.
Yeah, I think they want to keep Street Fighter 6 close to their chest until they know they can present it in a way that'll be really good visually. You know, that's smart. They're not doing what they did with Street Fighter 5, right? Where it's just, we'll just have a stage presentation. People can play like a very early version of the game. No, not doing that shit again. They want to make Street Fighter 6's reveal like a big deal, and they should. Like, the actual people want to see what that game looks like. People want to know if those visuals are going to be what the game will actually be like. How it's going to play like, you know? I think this to me makes it seem like they've learned their lesson. Well, that was fun.
Do you know it's always good? Maybe a year from now?
That was fun. We'll see when the heck the next one happens. It might be quite some time. A pretty good show with some interesting topics.